Hey there, wonderful teachers. Today I want to tell you about an awesome series of books that I have been using for a long time in my studio. These are one of my standard go-tos, one of the oldest actually that stuck around. They're called Microjazz. They're by Christopher Norton, and I absolutely love them. They're published by Boozy and Hawkes, and they go all the way from, they go from absolute beginners all the way up to level 3. I first found out about these because they're often included on our exam syllabus, and with good reason. So the Royal Irish Academy tends to include a few Christopher Norton pieces, and you find them in these books, and that's what made me research them in the first place, and I absolutely love them. I've been using them, as I said, for years. I mean, probably going on 10 years or so, most of my teaching time. So one of the things I love most about these are the backing tracks. They're great pieces on their own, don't get me wrong, but the backing tracks really sell it. They really drive it home, and they can make them so incredibly useful. The students I find these most useful for are ones that want something that sounds a bit jazzy and need to get through a lot of repertoire. So they're great to use as easier pieces alongside other stuff, right? So a student is doing a big project piece and you need them to still be moving through more reading pieces. These are great for that. They're all short. So even at the level 3, they don't go long, which I love. They're 1 page, which is amazing. 1 or 2 pages. And that's actually pretty rare. When you go up to that level, pieces start getting longer and longer and longer, and it's hard to move through enough repertoire doing these longer pieces. So those are great for that reason. But the backing tracks also make them useful for another type of student, ones that struggle with sight reading. And in particular, I've been experimenting with them lately with students who struggle to push themselves forward during sight reading. Like, they struggle to just roll down the hill is the phrase I use a lot, by which I mean that they're too cautious. They want to figure out every detail. And while I don't let them go back and forth when they're doing their sight reading, they'll just start incredibly slowly and cautiously, and they don't get that experience of really playing the piece, warts and all, and just forgetting about the note names and keeping going. And that's really what I want them to do during sight reading. So when I started thinking about this problem, I thought about, okay, when did this get better for me? When did I get better at that? Because I wasn't really very good at sight reading, going through all my exams and stuff. I dreaded it, right? Like most people do. And I realized that the reason I got really good at sight reading was playing teacher duets, especially the more complicated ones. I just had to do it, right? I just had to come up with something. Because you couldn't embarrass yourself and say, student, can we start again? I mean, you can do that sometimes, but you don't want to be doing that all the time. And so I just had to do it. I had to come up with notes that kind of made sense and just keep going. And this is the case for a lot of people where they played in a band or something like that, or they were accompanying someone, and you just have to come up with something that makes sense and go with it. And that's what I wanted for my students like that. Now, they're not playing in a band, so how could I give them that experience? And I remembered Microjazz. And although I use these as longer term study pieces, they're great for sight reading. So I have some students starting with the beginner book. By the way, I haven't used the absolute beginner, but the beginner book is great. I'm sure absolute beginner is fun too. So I'll give you an example. This is the backing track for a new piece. It's called a new piece. Every backing track comes in a performance and a backing track version, right? Without the piano. I like to use a performance one most of the time where it has the piano. Simple as that. It's just one line. But for a student who really struggles to just go for it, this is great. It's a bit of a challenge, but they start at a super easy level, so it's nice and comforting that the music isn't long, it's not complicated. I mean, staying right in middle C position, can't get much simpler than that. But they are forced to come up with something that makes sense and keep going. And I love that. this use of Microjazz. Now that's just a sort of fringe case. I absolutely have students who are learning these pieces more thoroughly, and I love them that way as well. So I hope you'll check out these books. I really enjoy using them in my studio, and they have stood this test of time absolutely and thoroughly. Let me know what you think of them in the comments below, and any questions, just give me a shout.